Here we go, folks. We're talking about this 1965 F250 4-wheel drive that came to us known as Big Red. Big Red had a lot of rust issues, so we had to find a good donor truck, which we did. This thing has a lot of sheet metal. It also has a lot of wasps' nests. This thing was crazy. It stung us all the time, every time we touched it. We rebuilt the suspension on the F250. We got the cab mounted, and we called a blasting company, one of those mobile blasting companies. They came out and they stripped the cab and the doors all the way down to bare metal so I could see how much of this thing is left, what I need to salvage, what I need to refabricate, and there is quite a lot of work. But we pulled in the blue truck and started stripping it down. Let's join in the progress now. If you've been following this build, you know that this Big Red truck is a 1965 and it was put onto a 1979 chassis before it came to me. It always had this strange look about it, and I could never really figure out why it looked the way it did. Some of you with keen eyes may already see what the difference is, but this is an 8-foot bed. You know, it's 8 foot. And yet the wheel wasn't in the same place, and I thought, how did they do that? You know, because again, it's an 8-foot bed, right? So I got one to replace the other, and I started looking at the size of this box, and I thought, well, if I can get that out of there, I'll put it in this one, because, you know, my buddy kind of wants that. That's cool. And I started measuring, and I went, well, why isn't there the same amount of space if they're both 8-foot beds? The closer I examined it, the wheel well on the inside, the big wheel well, wasn't in the center of this wheel opening, and I thought, what did they do here? Well, I know what they did. What they did was, if you look at the length of this wheel arch. From here to here, I mean, if you go all the way to the bottom, call it 42 inches. The wheel wasn't in the center, and I thought, that's sloppy work, you know. But now I see why the wheel wasn't in the center. 42 inches, right? Look at this one. 33 inches. So what they did was in order to correct the difference between the 65 and the 79, they moved the wheel arch. They stretched it. That's what put the opening underneath, you know, the wheel well, not in the center, because they stretched it. And that's what caused this to fail. If you look, this is the Bondo seam. For all I know, they took the front arch of another one and just stuck it on there and moved it. So what I need to do is, this metal is all good. This isn't rotted. These beds are unobtainium. You can't get them. The outside edge of this trim is like 34.5. So if you go over here, well, you don't have 34.5 because they moved the wheel arch. That's what started this whole thing for me looking at it going, why is this different? Why did this truck always look so different? And how did they get the wheel wells to be so close yet so wrong? Because they were wrong. When I first got Big Red over here, he had this look about him that just seemed odd, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But now that I'm doing what I'm doing, it was apparent. My solution is going to be a little bit more clever, I believe, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this fit that wheelbase correctly. Now, what I'm going to do is, because this is a full-size 8-foot bed and they didn't change that, I'm going to leave it as close to an 8-foot bed as I can get. But what I'm not going to do is oblong these wheel arches. I want to leave that. This box, we want to try and keep that box. But for the sake of argument right now, let's say it's not there. How about let's look at this one. It'll be easier to understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to center this opening on that tire, on that truck. When I do that, it should land the rear of this bed exactly the same place as it was. That shouldn't be any different. Because again, all they changed on this 8-foot bed was from here forward. Well, that's what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to change this or move the wheel well inside. And the reason is because I have the bed floors already cut out into pieces, and the way that I normally go about these, I'll set the bulkhead, and then I'll get the sides pre-made on the ground, and then I'll offer them up, tack them into place, so I have like a box with no floor, and then I'll make sure the tailgate fits, and then I'll go ahead and anchor it and then put the floor in it afterwards. That makes it a lot easier to get it exactly right. So for me, the measurement that changed, now keep in mind I didn't move the cab. The cab is right where the cab's always been. It's when it came to me. The measurement that changes from here to here, right? It's about 39.5 if you draw an imaginary straight line. And again, these aren't super accurate. This is just to illustrate. And over here, if you draw a straight line, you're about 30.5. So what we're gonna do effectively, and I can get a rough measurement right now. Let me look at the truck and I'll tell you. Let's go with, and it's an appearance too. So I'm gonna say about right there. 16 and 16. We're gonna go somewhere in here. It's like 4 inches. Okay, so I did an imaginary center line, and all of this isn't exact. This is just to illustrate. Mine is about 54 inches. What it needs to be over there is about 50. So essentially, I got to take 4 inches of this out. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to come over to, so I'll pull away from any complex, you know, stake pocket or any of that stuff. This trim's coming off. And I'll go say to like 12, we'll go mark, 16 mark, and we'll make that dead straight, dead square, and I'll surgically remove both sides. And this is called sectioning. I'm gonna section and pull this together. Then when this is welded and ground, you'll never see it, and this will land in the dead center the way it's supposed to. It'll still look like a long bed, but it'll only be 4 inches different, and most people won't even notice. They'll just be like, yeah, that truck looks right. Because the wheel is where it's supposed to be, the shape of the wheel well is factory, and it still measures 8 foot. It's just instead of 8 foot to here, it'll be 8 foot to here. Problem solved. So by taking out 4 inches out of this bed, the other one was 12 and this one was 4 later, then by taking this much out, do I want to keep this? Well, yeah. So how am I going to do it? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take probably 5 inches of this out and move it. So not only will I section this, I'll section this cover as well as the box inside. Now it's quite complicated to take this and section it. But I'm doing it, number one, because it's a challenge, and number two, it's going to look like it belongs there. Nobody's going to know how that worked. They're going to look at it and just think it all looks right, and nobody will ever be the wiser that it's a 79 under a 65 with 04 and 08 suspension and a 2021 engine. Now, before I take this off, one very important thing you must do when working on anything off of this blue truck. Yeah, we learned that the hard way. Yep, there you go. Yeah, today's a new day because yesterday was littered with bugs and it really just grossed me out, so I stopped. I stopped for the day. I have some other filming to do and I got to start grinding this stuff up. So let's take a close look at the truck itself. I'm going to uncover it and wheel it outside. We'll walk around it and talk about it. This thing really has come a long way. When Big Red first arrived, it had a lot of body filler and a lot of patchwork, which you saw. And rather than try and replace all this stuff, which it's virtually unobtainable, we had to get this donor truck. And what we're doing with it is, everywhere that the metal is terrible, like right here, for example, on this door skin, I'm gonna take a piece from the good blue doors and put it there, transplanting it, so that, kind of like a skin graft, so that when the body guy comes to do his work and paint, all the structural metal will have been repaired. Stuff like this hole, for example, to me, it looks like somebody took a claw hammer and went through it. I don't know, but there's a lot of filler here. So what I did was I went to the other cab and I removed this exact piece. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna clean that up, scribe it, and spot weld this in and literally replace with Ford metal. And I'm gonna do that everywhere I can. Some of this metal can be worked. Like, I don't need to replace any of this. If you spot weld a couple of slide hammer pins on there, the body guy can get that out. My main concern is where the perforations are. This thing took on a lot of water when it was together. And I'm gonna do my darndest to make sure that all of that is taken care of. I want you to be able to wash it without getting your feet wet, if you know what I mean. If you look closely at this cab and nose setup, right now it's kind of down a touch, and it's not going to be that way. This is just the first mock-up, so none of this is bolted in. It's all just setting on its mounts. You shim and use spacers to get this setting at the perfect plane, and I don't want to do that until I actually have the bed mocked up, and really, the engine and transmission weight should be sitting in the truck. Then I can get that body line, when you look down it, perfect. Some of this cab was pretty damaged, and the reality of it is we could restore this whole thing to a white glove treatment, but we've talked about it, and that's not what this is going to be. What this is going to be, these are going to be structurally repaired. You'll never see this anyways when the cab is together. So the fact that I strengthen this and patch all of these pieces under here, unless you're laying underneath it trying to show it at a car show, but that's not what we built this for. We built it to be used. You're going to be able to load it up with as much lumber as you want, hook a trailer to it, and mash the accelerator on the freeway. A mock-up like this one, there's an awful lot that remains to be done, and we're having some issues finding a ready-to-go crate engine, but we've got several people on it, and we're going to make that happen soon. I want all of that stuff in this truck before I set the core support and set all of the main body mounts on this truck. All right, are you filming?
Yeah.
Sorry, I think my dog just yacked one up over in the corner, but it didn't. I think it likes to eat things it finds. Come here, Daisy. Come here. You good? I don't know. She might have. You're gross. Anybody need a hound? Cheap? No. I'm gonna end with that.